Alright, now we're going to look at the male pelvis. So there's some things on here that you can't really see on the torsos. A couple of things I wanted to show you real quick first. This right here, this part of the model, is cut in a transverse plane. Okay, remember transverse is like cross-section, cutting the body from top and bottom. So if you look at it from this direction, you can see that this cut is cutting the model in top and bottom halves. So this would be a transverse plane. This right here would be sagittal plane. Okay? So that's a big difference. This right here is the abdominal cavity, remember, lined by parietal peritoneum. And this is all the pelvic cavity, this space down here. A lot of these structures we've seen before, and some of them are just going to be specific to the male pelvis. So here's your urinary bladder, here's your rectum, anus, which is just a passageway to the outside. Now the male is a little bit different. A lot of you aren't familiar with the male pelvic structures. Obviously everybody should know the penis. Okay, that's part of male reproductive system. Here's the testicle, part of male reproduction and part of the endocrine system. Coming into the bladder is the ureter, which is part of the urinary system. Okay, where were we? So this is the urinary bladder, part of the urinary system. Here's the ureter, part of the urinary system. Now underneath the urinary bladder, you can see this dark brown structure. This is called the prostate gland. It's part of the male reproductive system, contributes to the seminal fluid. This is the part of the body that becomes enlarged as men get older and makes them have difficulty going to the bathroom. This structure right here on the back of the bladder, it looks kind of like a grayish brain here. This is the seminal vesicle. This is also part of the male reproductive system, and this is responsible for producing most of the volume of semen. So as sperm travel from the testes where they're produced, they'll travel up this tube called the vas deferens, also part of male reproduction, over the top of the bladder, behind the bladder, through the seminal vesicle to pick up the fluid, through the prostate gland, and then out through the male urethra and through the penis for ejaculation. So that's kind of how everything moves around in the male reproductive system. And of course here's the rectum. Now if I take this section off, I can cut this in a sagittal plane and we can see what's underneath. Again, you have the urinary bladder, and remember all of these structures here are in the pelvic cavity. Here's the urinary bladder, here's the space inside, here's the rectum. Right underneath the urinary bladder is the prostate gland, cut in sagittal section, and you can actually see the male urethra here going all the way through out the penis. So in men, the urethra takes the urine and also takes the semen and the sperm. Here's the testicle in sagittal section. Okay, now we're going to look at the female. Okay, so here's the female reproductive model with the pelvic organs. So this is all pelvis in the female. This is all abdomen. So this is the abdominal cavity here where you see this big space. These are the female reproductive organs here. Have the rectum in the female as well, of course. This is just part of the aorta. We saw that in the male. You'd have the same type of sectioning up here being a transverse plane. And then this comes off in a mid-sagittal plane just like it did in the male. But let's look at it on the outside first. So in the female, remember females don't only have a bladder, they also have a uterus. The bladder sits under the uterus, so here's the urinary bladder with the ureter, both part of the urinary system. And this organ right here is the uterus. So it's on top of the bladder. Remember when women are pregnant, the baby is in the uterus and presses on the bladder. That's why they have to pee all the time. This right here is the vagina, the vaginal canal leading up into the uterus. This yellow structure here is the ovary. So males have a testicle that produces sperm and hormones. Females have the ovaries that produce sperm and hormones. Ovaries are part of the female reproductive system and the endocrine system. Eggs are produced here, and then are picked up by this structure right here called the fallopian tube, which is going to take them down around and into the uterus. And these are just the female external genitalia, which you guys don't need to know this semester. So let's take this off and look underneath. Here's our urinary bladder, uterus in the female, rectum. All of this is shown in the sagittal plane. This is the vagina or vaginal canal. This is the cervix right here leading into the uterus. Here's the female urethra. Notice how short it is compared to the male, which is why females tend to get urinary tract infections. And then again, here's the urinary bladder. You can see the ureter right here actually coming down from the abdominal cavity, going down behind the uterus and piercing the bladder. You can see that on the male model as well. Now I'm just going to show you a quick view of both male and female on a different model, and then we're nearly done. Okay, so we're going to look at another male pelvis real quick. I just wanted to show you the top. Again, you can see a transverse plane. You can see the abdominal cavity, which would be covered by parietal peritoneum. Turn them around this way. You can look down into the pelvic cavity, which is down here. This green structure is the ureter going down into the pelvis. This yellow tube right here is the vas deferens, which is the tube that carries sperm in the male. Now we'll look at the sagittal section here of this model, and we can see the urinary bladder, rectum, anus, prostate gland, penis, testes. If we look, I don't know if you guys can see it on this one, but if you look right behind the bladder, you can see the yellow tube of the vas deferens, and that's actually coming from this through the seminal vesicle there at the very back. But on this one, it's hard to see that. Let's take this out and see. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so you can see if I take it out and turn it over, you can see the vas deferens, which is that yellow tube. And right here, this little orange structure is your seminal vesicle. Remember, seminal vesicle is part of the male reproductive system as well as the prostate gland. They are not part of the endocrine system. The testes is, which is right here. And again, you can see your ureter in green, vas deferens in yellow. All right, let's look at this one in the female. Here's our female one. Again, transverse plane, abdominal cavity. You can look at our sagittal cut through our pelvis, rectum, anus, all part of digestion, uterus on top, urinary bladder below, urethra comes out of the bladder, vagina comes out and into the uterus. Here's the uterus itself. Probably can't see it, we'll have to take it out, but here's your pelvis, your pelvic cavity, and right there is the ovary, that one ovary on the right side. The left ovary would be out here. They're on either side of the uterus. So here's an ovary, endocrine and reproduction. This tube leading out of the ovary is your fallopian tube, carrying the egg to the uterus. This is your ureter, part of the urinary system. And that's pretty much it for the organs and systems. Now you just have to study it.